Welcome everyone to today's custom webinar with 3M. The webinar today will be about how Celonis is the measuring device for business transformation. My name is Christoph Grossbayer, and it's my great pleasure to welcome Tyler Safranek, who is the Value Realization Analyst at 3M. Tyler will be sharing 3M's transformation journey and how they leverage Celonis to maximize their ERP investment. As a reminder, we will be having a Q&A session at the end. So throughout the presentation, you can submit your questions through the GoToWebinar console. Now, without further ado, let me pass it off to Tyler.
Hello, everyone. This is Tyler here at 3M. I'm really excited to be here presenting on our Celonis journey, and very honored that Celonis would even ask me to do this presentation. So without further ado, I'd like to jump into our presentation here and talk about how Celonis has really been a catalyst for value realization in our business transformation journey. So I'll just go through a quick agenda here. I'll do a quick introduction on myself, my background, 3M at a glance, what our overall business transformation journey has looked like, and then where Celonis is coming into play and how we've seen Celonis be used here at 3M. So, and then like Christian said, we'll have some Q&A at the end here. So yeah, I'm Tyler Safranek. I'm formerly a value realization analyst here at 3M. We were kind of charged with looking at the ERP business transformation journey and trying to quantify whether or not we were actually getting that value realization investment from that journey. Currently, I've just moved to a new organization, and I've kind of been affectionately titled the Celonis guy in the 3M corporate IT organization. I've spent about 2 years now working full-time and supporting and deploying Celonis. When I got my hands on Celonis, my job responsibilities kind of shifted from doing those value realization quantifications to actually supporting and deploying and trying to get some value out of the tool that we invested here. So, and right now I'm currently the only Celonis FTE at 3M. Prior to that, I was working on the SAP GTS deployment portion of our business transformation journey. Through GTS, which is the Global Trade Services module of SAP, I actually got to learn a lot more about the whole ECC and SAP ecosystem. So learned modules like MM, SD, GTS, of course, extended warehouse management, and transportation management. And what I found when I got my hands on Celonis was that my skills that I picked up kind of in the trenches deploying these GTS modules was that those skills are extremely transferable to Celonis. It made me a really effective supporter of Celonis, and I could really get my hands dirty with the tool and start to understand our processes with Celonis. So if we want to take a step back and look at 3M at a glance, 3M is a pretty big company. We've got sales in over 200 countries, roughly 32.8 billion in sales. We had 5, now we're going down to 4 business groups, ranging from safety and industrial, transportation, electronics, healthcare, and also consumer. We've got 113,000 patents globally, and we've returned 100 straight years of dividends. So it's been a really interesting, and I'm still learning things about 3M that I never knew, and I've been here for now nearly 5 years, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. On top of the diverse businesses that we're involved in, we're actually very diverse geographically. Got sales in over 200 countries, operations in 70, and labs and plants all over the world. So as you can imagine, we have some extremely diverse business processes that go along with this. So our business transformation journey started back in 2011. The overall goal was to kind of establish a global ERP system across the company. We wanted to go from thousands and thousands of kind of legacy systems that maybe were, locally supported, making it very difficult to kind of communicate across the business and get that global view and bring that all into a single ERP system. The idea was that we would leverage the size and scale of 3M through standardizing global processes. And then again, like I said, having just a single instance of SAP ERP to kind of bring all of that data and all those processes together into a single kind of cohesive ecosystem. So as mentioned, we started in 2011, kind of established the methodology and approach to deploying SAP, ramped up the organization and structure, and kicked off the project. In 2012, we ran our first pilot in Taiwan and deployed SAP in Taiwan. From 2013 to 2017, we saw major deployments in some of our major business areas, such as Canada. Most of Western Europe is now fully deployed, and then some of Eastern Europe as well. 2018, we finally made it back to the U.S. and started deploying to our U.S. plants and to our U.S. customers, along with some other Eastern European countries as well. I would say we're about halfway through our overall SAP Polaris journey. Some of the chronic challenges that I've faced being a SAP GTS analyst kind of in the trenches here, and I've seen these things firsthand, is that first of all, our go lives and our stabilization often cause some kind of disruption to our customers. It's extremely difficult to go from one system to another without causing some kind of disruption. Our support teams were often reacting then to issues that were reported by our customers, which is a hard position to be in when you're trying to make sure that your customers are taken care of. You don't want to be on your heels and reacting to the issues that they're telling you have. The other thing I noticed was that the SAP learning curve is extremely steep. It took me probably 2 years or so to become a really effective functional analyst, having no prior SAP background. So you can only imagine what difficulty that proves for a business owner who's not going to be in the trenches trying to understand every little bit and piece of SAP. And then that lack of end-to-end visibility was really a difficult thing for our business owners to overcome. And then we also noticed that our kind of BI reports, and this is probably due to some of the 3M methodology, but our BI reports were kind of slow to deploy. And so when we had to fight fires during stabilization, it was very difficult to pull data that we needed in order to actually fight those fires and be proactive in resolving our issues. So I oftentimes felt like Kendrick Lamar in the Humble video with his head on fire, trying to fight fires, support testing, but I was also dreaming of a better way of how this could all be done. And so when I started to look outside of GTS for a new job, I found this job description that listed Celonis. And my immediate reaction to that was, where have you been all my life, Celonis? This is a tool that now can bring all of those different processes and lay them out for you very visually, very naturally, brings processes that are across multiple systems into a single view. And that I knew immediately when I saw those process flows that this is something that we can really leverage to bring that end-to-end visibility and drive that value realization out of our SAP investment. To me, Celonis is really the SAP to human translator. In order to be able to view a sales order, you have to know the transaction codes to get to that sales order within SAP, which is NBA 03. If you want to know if you've got a delivery for that, you need another transaction code. If you want to see the invoice, you need another one. Sometimes you don't have all the data readily available to you, so you have to go to your SC16 transaction, or go into a table within SC16, and you have to know all these different things in order to really piece all of this end-to-end visibility together. With Celonis, it brings it all into a single process view, that you don't have to understand all this technical jargon to really understand what your processes are doing in that system. I think there's also some really amazing natural advantages of the process mining framework. When you're using an event log to kind of structure your process and look at your data through this event log view, you immediately surface insights on things like cycle time. Every single event in that event log has a timestamp. So then measuring cycle times from start to end of your process is really, really natural. You've got metadata in that event log about who the users are that are performing each of the steps in your process. So now you can immediately start doing analysis on your automation. Do you have batch users that are performing operations for you, or are you having issues where users are going in there and actually having to do certain steps more often than they should? And then you can also look at the real process conformance of your overall process. This is a game changer, because before you would oftentimes have to do a whole lot of process discovery and interviews with stakeholders and process people to understand your overall process. With Celonis, it lays it out for you in a very, very specific way that is tied directly to data. So now, instead of having to do sort of like, this is what we think the process is, this is how we think it's working right now, we actually have real data and a chart that shows you immediately how your process is working. The other thing that I found with process mining in Celonis is that you can really, really explore your data. Once you've got that event log set up, you can then add in additional attribute tables that really allow you to kind of slice and dice your table by different dimensions. That was really basically impossible previously. So I can look at cycle times by plant, I can look at cycle times by a specific material, I can look at the same cycle times by material groups or different business groups, all with a few clicks of a button. Whereas, in previous BI environments, this would have been a real challenge for us, because each of one of those different reports would probably have to have been a different report in and of itself. This can all be done now within a single data model and doing all of this at the same time. And no PhD required. There's really no special magic behind or machine learning behind process mining. It's just a different subtle way of structuring your data that has really made a huge impact in how we look at our overall processes and how we look at our data. And I think the most powerful portion of Celonis is really that it tells the story of your business processes with Celonis. There was recently, we recently released the 3M Science Index report that talks specifically about how scientists, and I take this even as a data analyst, we need to be able to present data in a way that is more telling a story rather than presenting numbers. Celonis does this by immediately laying your process out in a story format. And you can then explore and choose your own adventure in this story by looking through your data and slicing and dicing. It's a subtle thing, but it has a tremendous impact on understanding your processes and then driving change from that process. If you have a common understanding, it's much easier to drive those changes. So talking a little bit about our journey with Celonis, I'll say that, at the end of 2016, there was a little bit of budget left over in the IT organization, and they decided to take a chance on this up-and-coming company called Celonis. And it was, I think, one of the best investments they've made. From the end of 2016 to about middle of 2017, we were standing up the HANA environment that we're running on, and then getting the application server in place, and then getting all the data that we needed over into this HANA environment. From there, we actually purchased a few out-of-the-box data models from Celonis and analyses as well. One for OTC, which is order to cash, as well as STP for purchase to pay. And so these, once we had those, all we had to do was really just drop them in onto the data. They create the views immediately, and we're off and running. There was really very, very, very little time required to actually customize or do anything that before we could actually start using and driving insights from these analyses. We also got on-site analyst training in June, which really enabled me and a few other folks to become better analysts within Celonis. In July 2017, we were again engaged with Celonis to do sort of a co-innovation on an intercompany model. There's a lot of intercompany business for 3M, and it's quite complicated, as there are sometimes multiple hops between entities that we need to kind of be able to track. Celonis was able to take their existing STP model or purchase to pay model and kind of adapt it to the 3M intercompany model. And so this was the first time that we'd ever actually been able to see in a single view all the different documents and the different steps that were involved in our intercompany processes. October 2017, we had on-site data scientist training, where we got to know some of the back-end portions of Celonis, how to create event logs on our own, how to basically do the data administrative work of Celonis on our own. In February 2018, we again engaged with Celonis for a production planning model. This was, I believe, taken from basically an app store model that's available, and customized a little bit for us. And then in May 2018, I actually created our first kind of 3M homegrown data model for accounts receivable. That was an interesting process, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit here. And then the next set of homegrown models that we engaged with was Vistex, and looking at claims that are being processed through Vistex as well as agreements. And so work on that is all still ongoing as well. So our current footprint at Celonis, or at 3M of Celonis, is basically we have SAP Process Mining by Celonis version 4.3. It's all on premises. So we have our app server here as well as our HANA system that we're reading from. We've got 7 process models and well over 30 analyses. So our order to cash model started out as a Celonis App Store purchase, and then we basically have, after that data science training and analyst training, we've customized it to our own needs. Purchase to pay, kind of the same thing. We've started with a Celonis App Store and then customized it. Intercompany was, again, a Celonis development that we kind of co-innovated on, and we further customized it, and kind of the same with production planning and execution. Accounts receivable, Vistex, those were all, again, 3M homegrown data models that we created on our own. So here's where I'll say that if I had my choice, I would 100% always choose to start with the Celonis App Store model. They are, they've been developed with the kind of standard processes in mind and the standard process steps that should be transferable to basically any SAP system, any Salesforce system. And then you can really take that, and if you have specific customizations that you need to make, you can make those directly to those data models and really take that model to the next step. When you purchase from the App Store or get a model from Celonis, it's really, really plug and play. All you need to make sure is that you have the data available in your system. Then you can run the scripts and you're off and running, basically. When you're doing a homegrown type model, it's going to take a few weeks. It took me multiple weeks because I didn't have an accounts receivable background to kind of understand how we needed to structure the model, what data we needed. And the same with Vistex. There's a whole process discovery piece that you need to go through in order to really kind of be able to build this. But so I would say, without a doubt, I would 100% go with trying to get those App Store models first, and then taking them further with your own customizations. So I'll quickly kind of run through some of our use cases here at Celonis, or at 3M, excuse me. Our first and probably the most successful use case has been partnering with our Lean Six Sigma team. And we have a whole organization within 3M that is specifically focused on doing Lean Six Sigma projects. Employees come in for a two-year commitment to be full-time Lean Six Sigma black belt, working on various projects to improve overall organizational efficiency. So this was just a natural fit for Celonis and users of Celonis to really start to drive that value that we wanted to see from our SAP investment. So our global service delivery team was focused in this initial project on order to cash cycle times, and focused even more so on our initial deployment of SAP in the U.S. So that was a U.S. plant within SAP. Basically, what they did was to split this end-to-end process up into a few sub-processes to focus their efforts a little bit more. So we had basically the order to plant sub-process, where we're looking at kind of the order entry phase and seeing how quickly our CSRs are getting orders through and dropped into the plant so that the plant can then execute on those orders. How quickly is then the plant or DC to getting those goods out the door? How quickly are we executing on that? And then then the ship to cash phase, where we're looking at are our customers then making good on their basically, are they paying us on time? And I think one of the major benefits of Celonis in these projects was the decreased time to map and understand our processes. A lot of the time, and most of the time in Lean Six Sigma projects, there's a whole phase of process discovery, trying to understand what your process actually is, what it should be, where do we think there may be some bottlenecks in your process. Celonis basically did that for them, and dramatically decreased the time that they had to spend to actually go and understand their processes. It definitely also increased the effectiveness of the dialogue with the stakeholders, because now we have this model here that we can say, this is tied to data directly in your system. Let's talk about this, and let's try to get to a common understanding of what's going on in your process. And it also standardized our measurement methodology, which is a huge thing for Lean Six Sigma. Their MSAs are very important, so having a tool like this that can readily tell you exactly what the start and end points of your cycle are, how you're measuring that, is just a huge boost in their productivity. The other thing I'll say too is that some of these black belts didn't even have access to SAP. They were simply operating off of Celonis data, because it already gave them basically all of the information they needed to be an effective communicator with their stakeholders. So I'm not sure how many projects can say that they didn't even really touch the main system that they were working on improving. So that's a huge thing for our Lean Six Sigma team, and they continue to drive and use Celonis for a variety of things in our organization now. So here's just a quick snapshot of one of the cycle time analyses that we created for the Lean Six Sigma team. This basically allows the whoever goes in here to kind of select what their kind of sub process is actually looking like. So in this snapshot, we have just the start activity of create sales order item to the ending activity of record goods issue. We're going to kind of measure their cycle time in hours here. So we have these three different lines on the graph that show basically the average cycle time, the median cycle time, and then kind of our standard deviation. The dark area there is then the number of cases that have actually completed the cycle. And then the lighter yellow area is the number of cases that did not complete the cycle. And it's just kind of the total number of cases there. Then we have some table down below where they can actually export that data, and they like to use software called Minitab to run some more further analysis with that data. So it's great to be able to then just kind of export that information and run it through some additional statistical softwares there too. The next kind of major use case that we found for Celonis, and this was a huge win for us. We had a major event back in March of 2018 that really impacted our businesses. So this chart here is basically showing kind of the rhythm of our process. So we've got day to day, how many sales order lines are being processed, delivery lines are being processed, lines are being shipped out, and lines are being billed here. And so you can kind of see that rhythm. We go Monday, we've got a spike in orders being processed, and then we take a break on the weekends. Thank goodness. But in March, we had a major disruption here. And basically, folks came in on Monday and were not able to use the system at all. Tuesday came around and still were not able to use the system. And we basically had to focus our recovery efforts majorly. And so this actual chart came from the recovery efforts, because our C-level executives were wanting to know, are we getting back on track? Where are we at with our recovery efforts? So you can see on March 23rd, we got things back online. We had basically a major catch up in terms of all the sales order lines that we had to process, delivery lines being created, and then things being billed and shipped later in that week. So this basically then, as we continued to monitor it, we could see visually that yes, okay, now we're getting back to a normal rhythm here, and our basic processes are getting back to normal. I was basically able to do this within about 24 hours of understanding what the problem is and being brought into a room full of about 20 different reporting analysts who are all trying to work kind of in unison on this project. I was able to do this kind of single-handedly in about 24 hours and give this chart back to our executives to say, yeah, we're getting back on track here. There's definitely some disruption, but we're gonna be okay. The other thing that has really been a huge win for Celonis is kind of our proactive issue management for our customers. As I said, we've kind of been operating in a very reactive model with our support resources and trying to basically support our customers, but that we're not able to get ahead of our issues here. With Celonis now, we're starting to be able to really monitor some of the things like ASN and proof of delivery processing, which is kind of a huge thing for us in the US deployments. We can now kind of trace an order to see if there are certain issues that may have occurred with that order and do root cause analysis for the customer right there. So just for, if you think about it, how would you feel if you called a customer service agent and they couldn't answer your question about where your order was at or what may have been causing the problems? Probably not very good. With Celonis now, our CSRs and our account managers can go in and say, okay, yes, I see this problem here. This is probably what happened. We had a delay in shipping that probably caused your order to be backed up a little bit. But we're working on that, and we're going to maybe choose a different carrier the next time to make sure that your order gets there on time. So overall, it's just it's fewer surprises for 3M and our customers, which is most important for us. One of the last kind of use case I'll talk about here is kind of getting to standard work and process adherence in our production planning space. So basically, the idea here is that we're going to be tying our process guidelines in our job aids essentially to specific KPIs within Celonis. And so then now using that, we can basically monitor process adherence across different plants, materials, MRP controllers, you name it. We can kind of slice and dice that data to understand where we maybe need to enhance training for our planners, or maybe there's a system error going on where we need to actually make a change in our system. This also allows us to actually really drill down into our individual process nodes and those areas where we have very specific process guidelines set up, and then also roll up that overall process conformance to kind of a high level. What is our overall process conformance in the production planning space? So this has been a really eye-opening experience for our production planning team to start to understand the overall what their standard work is looking like and how their planners are adhering to that standard work. In terms of additional use cases, I thought I'd throw a few out that are kind of just in the back of my head that I've been toying with, and I think that could be really interesting use cases for Celonis overall. So the first one is integrating Celonis into our testing for new deployments. And what I'd like to see, and what I've kind of thought about recently, is we spend a lot of time testing our deployments to see if there are defects. Basically negative testing, trying to find where things are wrong. With Celonis giving us that end-to-end view, we can now start to look at, are we getting orders through successfully without any touches? Are we getting a full positive test on our deployments in our countries where we're not yet deployed, but we're testing things and would like to see if we can get our process to flow smoothly before we even get it out the door. You don't always get that with negative testing, and you don't always get the feel for the overall how well your process is going to work when you let it out into the wild. With Celonis, we can see every little step in the process, whereas before we didn't have that end-to-end visibility. We're also looking at doing some internal IT process management with Celonis, so things like change management and development in Jira. There's always already a few metrics that we can pull from Jira, but looking at things like how the transports work in conjunction with Jira and the overall kind of change management flow, Are things getting processed as quickly as they can? Are they taking steps back, being changed quite frequently, so on and so forth? This will be really eye-opening for us for our own internal processes, as well as, of course, ticket resolution and issue resolution. Celonis is very integrated already with ServiceNow, but I think we could probably do something similar with our internal system, ITSM. So those are just a few of the ideas that I've been toying with, and hopefully, as we continue to grow our Celonis organization, we'll be able to get our hands on some of those new processes. So that's about it for my presentation. I would really like to hear from you all now and answer some questions. And thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for a very insightful presentation. And there are also a ton of questions coming in.
Great.
We have been prioritized in the background, but maybe just the first one. You mentioned around the collaboration with the stakeholders, especially on the business side, how that collaboration has been supported by getting that process insights and optimization potential via Celonis. Can you? There was one question about how do you typically engage with these users in the business groups across 3M to maximize the Celonis use? Can you speak a little bit about how this collaboration works and what part does Celonis play in that?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question, and that's something that we're still kind of wrestling with here at 3M. I think lately our model has been to just kind of give out access to users kind of as requested. We don't have a whole lot of security in place on Celonis right now, so we do have to be a little bit careful about how we deploy Celonis. One of the big things for 2019 is going to be getting table-based security in place. But really, it's been kind of a groundswell of interest in Celonis because one person gets it, has access to it, starts showing some charts to their boss, and they say, "Oh, what's this?" So it's really I don't really have to do a whole lot of driving to get engagement from our business users to really start to take interest in it. It's really been kind of on its own, just through the strength of the product being so intuitive and easy to use. But I think looking forward to the future, what we'd like to do is basically have kind of a center of excellence and maybe a few data engineers, myself and maybe 2 or 3 other people that are responsible for kind of the overall architecture of the Celonis models, and then have basically kind of like satellite organizations within each of our businesses where we have some kind of like level 2 power users that are going to be basically supporting their end users of the tool. And I think Celonis is a super powerful tool, and with that power comes a lot of responsibility because it surfaces a lot of information really, really quickly and easily. So we're still kind of working through the strategy for how do we deploy and who's the right audience for this. I don't think every plant operator is going to want access to Celonis or necessarily need it. But certainly, managers and plant managers and business owners around the globe are going to want access to this to be able to understand what their processes are looking like. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Another question here would be around the SAP implementation, also the global business transformation. Can you compare like the timelines of when did that happen or happened and as it happens right now, and how does the Celonis journey kind of ties into that?
Yeah, so we started in 2011, like I said, and we're basically, I would say, 60% of the way deployed. We still have about we have all of South America left. We have China, Tokyo. So we've got a lot of ground to cover still in our SAP journey. And then Celonis came in, like I said, basically in 2017. So we've really had it for about 2 years now. So I'd say about a quarter of the time that we've been deploying SAP, we've had access to Celonis. And so, yeah, I think, as we deploy more, and I think kind of the first real proving ground for Celonis was in some of our first deployments in the U.S. when in about late 2017, 2018, where we could actually see, the activities ramping up for our U.S. deployments happening right in Celonis in almost real time. So that was some really interesting some really interesting insights we gained from those deployments, looking at how basically, we had at one point in late 2017, I think Christmas Eve, we were looking at some of this new plant that was going live in the U.S. and our overall process kind of conformance had dropped to basically 2%. And so Celonis was the tool that we chose to use to basically monitor the key issues that were being we found there. I was able to go in and add additional activity nodes into the process or the event logs, so that we could monitor the specific things that we were looking at, and then see exactly how those issues were getting resolved, who was most affected, and basically give leadership the visibility to the end-to-end process and how we're doing in terms of our overall process conformance. So I think, going forward, that'll be a really, really powerful tool to use and to monitor our kind of stabilization efforts going forward.
Awesome. Then another question is, if you had to start all over again, in the sense that you are in a similar company with like 3M, but would be kind of like the 3 low-hanging fruits you would immediately dig in with the experience you made so far with the Celonis journey?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think it kind of depends on if you're in a business transformation initiative or not. If you want to talk about maybe a steady state company that has maybe had SAP deployed already, I would say the first one that I would go after is probably automation rates. And actually, T. Nguyen from Siemens does a great presentation on his metric called digital fit rate, which looks at kind of the overall rework rate and the automation rate within the company. And he's driven amazing results using that methodology to look at across the businesses, how are we doing with our automation, and basically, taking a data-based approach and leading out the company, because once they get to a certain rate, they know that they only need a certain number of FTEs. So I think that is the number one low-hanging fruit, would be that kind of those automation rates. Cycle times, again, are very easy to analyze, and out of the box, Celonis has a lot of great tools to analyze cycle times. So that would be another one too, where I would say, you could probably go after your ship to cash kind of cycle time, looking at making sure your customers are paying on time, and then also are they getting discounts, or are they not getting discounts when they're supposed to? And then that's a huge one, I think, for us too, is to kind of look at that. And then I would say just overall process conformance too. Again, Celonis has a conformance checker, which is amazing. It's a standard thing. You don't have to do any kind of customization to it, really. But it basically allows you to look at your overall process, set up what a should-be map of the process is, and then kind of compare your real process to that should-be map. And then it even does additional kind of correlations on top of it to tell you, here's some of the things that may be contributing to your process non-conformance. So those are I think are probably my top 3 right there.
Okay, awesome. I mean, one other question is particular to you and your own development path with Celonis. What skill set did you already have that made you really, that helped you with being successful with Celonis? And what skill set did you have to acquire over time to make you even better? Can you speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, I think so. I would say probably the number one skill that I had kind of acquired already through some of my GTS experience was just an understanding of kind of the table structures and the data structures in SAP. I kind of already had an understanding of the VBAP tables and kind of how CD header and CD POS, our changelog tables, were structured. I learned a lot more about them, but I actually kind of had a decent idea about how that was all going to work and where to go to get some of that information. So that was, I think, the number one thing that kind of helped me just to be able to pick Celonis up and start running with it from a development perspective. And I'm speaking more from like being able to customize Celonis and really develop it. If you didn't have those skill sets, you could still use Celonis to drive change in your organization. Just being able to understand and speak with CSRs and understand their processes and their struggles would be a huge advantage for you to then go and then look at Celonis and be able to kind of compare those experiences with what's being shown in Celonis. But for me personally, I think that was to be able to just pick it up and become, really comfortable with being like a data engineer in the back end, was having those kind of technical backgrounds. Things that I've learned a lot about different processes that I had no idea about. Specifically things like Vistex and AR, as we've kind of developed our own data models on top of those. I've just learned a lot about the process, and I've learned a lot more about the business. Coming from a very IT-centric kind of background, I've learned a lot more about the business. So yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say one more thing on that. That I don't actually have a computer science degree or anything. Full disclosure, I'm actually a psychology undergraduate, and everything that I've learned about SAP and IT has been kind of self-taught and on-the-job training. So, like I said, you really don't need to have an advanced degree to be able to pick Celonis up and really start being a superhero at your organization. So.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Then there are a couple of questions around the value drivers of Celonis. Can you comment a little bit on, what kind of key business KPIs are you influencing with the usage and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, the main kind of value drivers right now for us have been process conformance, and really getting to the point where we are surfacing issues where there's a very low process conformance in certain areas, and then we're able to then go and say, okay, this is an area where we need to provide more training to our users so that they're able to work within the system as we would expect them to. This is not something that we could have ever really done prior to having Celonis. It would never have been able to, without a specialized group of people developing specific reports for that express purpose, wasn't something that we could easily get to. So using Celonis now, we're really able to see across the entire, all of our business groups, a geographically diverse company. We can see everything kind of under one roof and compare kind of apples to apples. How are we doing in this area compared to this area? What process steps are causing us the most trouble right there? So that's been, it's really been the biggest focus for our global leaders right now, is to really make sure that the standardized processes that we set out to create within SAP are in fact being followed.
Okay. And I mean, just tagged on that answer, Tyler, there's a customer here that says they're facing kind of a little bit of defensive nature when it comes to approaching a group about process non-conformance. Like typical answers like, hey, the data says you're doing this, but well, we always have been doing this. The customer wants it this way. Kind of, please leave me alone. How does that conversation change now?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's just a kind of an organizational change management piece. There's really there's no substitute for kind of helping your users see the light. So I think with Celonis, the great thing about it is that you can actually show them other areas where there's process conformance and how much better their life could be if they were to follow a specific process. It's not an easy conversation. It's really not, because you have, like you said, users that have been doing it a certain way for forever. But I would try to focus on things like, there's a better way to do things, and steer the conversation that way, because that's what's really going to drive people to kind of change. And if they can understand, maybe how somebody else in another part of the organization is working and doing things a little bit better, maybe they'd be a little bit more willing to change. But and to be honest, I'm again supporting Celonis most of the time from a technical side and developing new kind of KPIs, and I have some super users that are going out and really kind of driving the change, and I'd like to see more of that. But I don't often get to interface with the specific users that we're trying to change behavior with. So But if I were to do it, that's kind of how I would try to frame the discussion, is that there's a better way to do things, and we can help you do those things better. So.
No, great. Then there was one question around the Celonis Content Store, App Store, and also the 3M customization. So your recommendation was kind of starting off with kind of more the standardized approaches, and then dig more into the more customizations. So that the question here is, can you describe some of the customizations? What are they exactly, and how difficult was it actually to implement? You look at intercompany at this tax. Can you give us a little bit more insight there of the implementation process here?
Yes, certainly. So, I think a lot of our customizations, I would say about 80% of our quote-unquote customizations are just developing new analyses and on top of the data that's already kind of in the data model. So surfacing kind of new KPIs, maybe it's like kind of a process conformance centric metric, or maybe a cycle time, or certain fields, or some kind of correlation or something to that effect, where we're looking, we want to slice and dice the data by a sort of a different dimension here. So that's really done basically all within the UI, and a lot of the times what I've done is just kind of take some of the content store apps that we purchased and then duplicating them and then just kind of modifying them to our own specifications. The other 20% is actually adding in kind of new activity nodes or new event log events that we can then actually start to analyze within Celonis. So that's where I'm going in and basically asking the users to, show me an example of when this is actually happening. And then I can actually just go in there and take a look at the specific case that they're looking at, and then basically try to hunt down the timestamp of what they're looking at. So things like, if we wanted to see a change in a specific field in the outbound delivery, they would just basically give me one of those outbound deliveries where that issue occurred. I can then go in and take a look at it in a HANA environment, looking in kind of the CD header or CD pos tables, the changelog tables, to see where those specific timestamps might be living. And then once I have that, once I've just kind of zeroed in on that specific timestamp, I can then write an activity definition for that particular activity. And then anytime that kind of data signature occurs within the change logs, we're able to surface that and it's added to the event log, and then we can see it in Celonis. So that's been, really, really powerful for us, especially with intercompany model, being able to kind of surface the specific issues that we needed to look at and needed to be monitoring. So, and then as far as it's kind of just an exaggerated version of that when we're actually creating the kind of the homegrown data models. It's basically me talking with the process stakeholders, asking them to give me examples of the process, show me the documents, show me the data in SAP. I'll go in and try to figure out how we can then structure that data into a set of a case table and an event log table, and then find those relevant timestamps within the change logs or wherever they may be living in the database, to then basically structure that event log and label kind of each of these activities that we have. So, and that's, especially for if you have no background in the process, it can be very time intensive, and it takes a while, at least just to understand it and be able to kind of structure that process into your kind of process mining framework. So, I think that's kind of how we do it here, at least. Yeah.
Awesome. Now, so one last question is around automation opportunities. Can you speak a little bit about the initiatives around increasing or improving automation at 3M and how you see Celonis supporting that?
Yeah. Automation is definitely been an increasing focus for us in the business transformation journey here at 3M. And we are just kind of starting to use Celonis to its full capabilities to really start to drive and understand where we have opportunities to improve automation. So right now, some of the things that we're looking at for automation purposes are conversions of certain like planned orders to a process order. making sure that, our batch jobs that are running and our planning jobs that are running are going to actually do the conversions the right way, and converting them automatically so that our users aren't going in there and having to convert everything, or our users going in and maybe changing the plan and converting something ahead of time or too late. So we want to make sure that we're letting SAP do its job in the planning functions, so that, and that automation rate within the kind of the conversion area is kind of a really key indicator of are we letting SAP do its job, and is the plan doing the right thing to get our orders converted without anybody having to touch them. So we're starting to look into that in the production space. We're also doing that now in the procurement side of things too. So looking at stock transfer requisitions or purchase requisitions converting into POs and STOs. So we're just scratching the surface right now in terms of what our automation, what kind of automation activities we can surface with Celonis. I would love to see us take a full, take a deep dive into digital fit rate, like Siemens has, and really look at, kind of our end-to-end process and looking at specific activities, activity node by activity node, to make sure that we're actually having automation at the highest level that we possibly can and in the right areas. So, but right now, we're just kind of scratching the surface.
Okay, awesome. So Tyler, just looking at the time, thanks so much for taking the time today, answering the questions, also giving the presentation and some insight into how you guys at 3M are using Celonis. Thanks everyone for attending the webinar. To the point, the last point about process automation, we actually have an upcoming webinar with IDC, an analyst firm, April 11th, on how to accelerate operations through intelligent process automation. So that's for you guys who are interested in learning more about that. Certainly another great webinar in our pipeline. But for now, thank you very much, Tyler. Thanks everyone for attending, and I wish you all a good day.
Thank you all.